In her previous life, Wei Zi was betrayed and killed by her husband and her in-laws. In this life, Wei Zi was determined to live for herself, reading and reading, doing business to make money, and at the same time, raising and rehabilitating Xiao Fengxian, the prostitute who is currently unpopular in her husband's family and the most brutal and arrogant traitor in the court in the future. Years later, Wei Zi recognized her ancestors and returned to her ancestral home, becoming a young lady in the mansion that her husband and mother-in-law could no longer aspire to. The wealthy women in the capital spread rumors that she is too old to get married. The powerful court tycoon bent down and personally brushed off the dust on her shoe. He begged in front of thousands of people, "Miss, how about marrying me?" He was a young man raised by her own hands. It is also a precious treasure in the heart. People say that it is the most difficult for a woman to remarry, but that year Wei Zi remarried and married a young prince who was granted the title of Marquis and Minister at the age of 18. Keywords of the novel. After being widowed, I was lured to marry by a sick and powerful minister without a pop-up window. After being widowed, I was lured to marry by a sick and powerful minister. Download the complete text. After being widowed, I was lured to marry by a sick and powerful minister. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. How to know the spring like this. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. How to know the spring like this. How hard is it to be a widow at the age of 15? Wei Zi personally experienced it. My mother-in-law was afraid that she would be too young to endure loneliness, so she bound her in shackles and trapped her in the backyard, working as a cow and a horse. And she didn't know until her death that her husband, who went to Beijing to take the imperial examination and fell into the water, did not die. Not only did she not die, but she also married the legitimate daughter of Chongping Marquis' mansion and rose to high status. Now he is even the top scorer in high school, with endless glory. And she, just a child bride, will only become a stumbling block for him to rise to the top. He deserved to be pushed into the well by his mother-in-law and drowned. But she was the wife he married openly and without any complaints. After serving these people for 3 years, she ended up like this. How ruthless is the heart of the Xiao family. Thinking of her tragic past life, Wei Zixin was dripping blood. Lazy guy. Outside the door, Lu Pozi's sharp cries interrupted Wei Zi's thoughts. Wei Zi lifted the iron chain from her feet and was about to get up. Lu Pozi broke into the door. You lazybones, the old lady and young lady are about to wake up. Why don't you get up and cook water and serve them? Before Wei Zi could react, Lu Pozi had already rudely lifted her up. Wei Zi's center of gravity was unstable, and her feet stumbled. The iron chain dragged on the ground with a muffled sound. What are you doing? What are you doing? Lu Pozi tugged at her abruptly as she saw the situation. Wearing it is for your good. Our family treats you well. Don't follow those unscrupulous women. When you see a man, just open your legs and do something wrong to the young master. Wei Zi's eyes turned red with anger. Who the hell is sorry for who? She has been pure and innocent for 2 lifetimes. And that Xiao Fengxian, at this moment, may have already embraced the waist of the legitimate daughter of the Marquis' mansion. And these people actually helped him keep it from her. Wei Zi took a glance at Lu Pozi. What are you looking at? Mrs. Lu pretended to be fierce with her. Wei Zi dodged and said lightly, Grandma Lu also knows that there are people in our courtyard who are indecisive. Last night when I came back from the kitchen, it seemed like I saw the old man guarding the door go out through the small door. Upon hearing these words, Lu Pozi's face turned pale. Yesterday, Madame rarely went to bed early, and the gatekeeper was not on duty. He shouted diligently, but Mrs. Lu couldn't help it. Wei Zi didn't point it out. She is now alone and helpless in the mansion. What's the use of knowing that Lu Pozi is not careful? Why don't you give a warning and imagine a relaxed day? Lu Pozi was skeptical and didn't dare to expose herself. She arrogantly said, "Don't distort your thoughts, and honestly keep the young master as a widow." She didn't dare to linger any longer and twisted her waist to leave. Wei Zi stood alone by the window. She pushed open the window as if venting her anger and said, "Watch your mother's widow, let your whole family be widowed by yourselves." Unexpectedly, just as she finished cursing, strange laughter suddenly came from not far away. Wei Zi woke up in shock and looked for his reputation. Across from him was a quaint small study. On the steps outside the study, there sat a young man like a leisurely cloud in a wild crane, staring at him inexplicably. Wei Zi's head exploded with a loud bang. These days, she has only been focused on sadness and has forgotten about this person. Her little uncle. Xiao Fengxian. The most despicable and filthy prostitute in the Xiao family today has children, and the most brutal and arrogant traitor in the world in the future. Xiao Fengxian is the son brought back by his father-in-law from outside. It is said that he was born to a brothel prostitute who used to be happy with him. He is not well liked by his mother-in-law and often scolds him as a wild seed. But Wei Zi knew that in 3 years, at the age of 17, Xiao Fengxian would become the youngest explorer since the founding of the country. Afterwards, he rose to fame and covered the sky with one hand. However, Xiao Fengxian is a heartbroken and extremely evil person. He worshipped the eunuch as his adoptive father, invented 90.980.1 forms of torture, arrested and tortured high-ranking officials as he pleased, and countless officials died in the prison of his mansion. He arrogantly and recklessly walked up to the palace, not even the prince and princess. He turned the Chang'an officialdom into a sea of corpses and blood on his own. The people of the neighborhood are given the nickname Little Yanluo. Xiao Lingxiao once suppressed Xiao Fengxian based on his elder brother's identity, but suffered a great loss. His official rank was demoted 3 levels in a row, but in the end, he was so frightened that he couldn't control his urine when he heard the 3 words, Xiao Fengxian. Wei Zi remembers that after her death, her soul wandered around the Xiao family's house, witnessing Xiao Fengxian killing her father and brother with a knife and a smile. He never let go of 100 people in the house, and even the prominent marquis's daughter died tragically in a pool of blood. He is so good-looking, but his mind is so cruel. When looking at Xiao Fengxian outside the small study, Wei Zi couldn't help but shiver. She just cursed, as if he heard it. Xiao Fengxian smiled and looked at the girl behind the window, as if she had met this widow for the first time. After a while, he said, "Sister-in-law, be well." Wei Zi dared not look directly into his eyes and stuttered, "You're fine too." The delicate white fingertips unconsciously teased the window lattice, and Wei Zi hesitated for a long time. She mustered the courage to look at Xiao Fengxian and said, Did you hear something just now?" Xiao Fengxian said, "I only heard the wind passing by." Wei Zi was about to breathe a sigh of relief when she heard Xiao Fengxian speak innocently. "I also heard a female sparrow with a dead companion muttering and cursing early in the morning. Sister-in-law, my younger brother is ignorant, and my master has never taught her in the academy. I don't know what the phrase, guarding your mother's widow, means." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Little Widow Who No One Wants. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The Little Widow Who No One Wants. Wei Zi's heart attack. He did indeed hear everything. Xiao Fengxian tilted his head. His widowed sister-in-law is young and dull. Since she moved into the opposite room, that window has never been opened. Only before going to bed every day, when the girl gracefully undresses under the shadow of the lamp, does she remind him that someone is there. He thought she was going to live and die in this house for the rest of her life, but today, for the first time, she started cursing people. Interesting. While he was playing, Wei Zi tightly held on to the window lattice. The cruel and ruthless traitor in the future is now just a naive youth. She has lived several more years, can't she still handle a child? Thinking of this, Wei Zi suddenly wet her eyes. She choked up and said, "I'm not afraid of my younger brother's joke. I really can't survive anymore, so I had the courage to curse a few words. If you tell your mother.in.law, this family probably won't be able to accommodate me anymore. Is it because my younger brother wants to force me to death?" Wei Zi lowered her moist long eyelashes and covered her eyebrows and eyes with a handkerchief, sobbing a few times. In the pupils, there are all calculations. She's crying so much, should she be able to make this little child feel a little soft-hearted? Xiao Fengxian squinted his eyes. When the little widow was sold to the Xiao family back then, she was just a little girl. As soon as she entered the door, she cried and couldn't stand it. She had been sparring with the Xing family for several years, and now she was even more timid and scared. With just a few words, she cried so pitifully, trembling in the wind like a weak and helpless little white flower. "I'm afraid if he scares her a few more words, she will hang herself on the beam. The people in this house are all very bad. They find him a shameful, filthy child of a prostitute, and wish he would die soon. Only this little widow treats him like a person. Every time I meet her, she would ask softly, 'How are you, second brother?'" Xiao Fengxian didn't want the little widow to die. But he also doesn't want to help people for no reason. He said slowly, "Sister-in-law, I want to eat fish." Wei Zi choked. Early in the morning, who has the time to make fish for him? She doesn't like to serve people now. However, the handle fell into his hands, and Wei Zi had to bow down. She wiped her tears and said, "Why is this difficult? I'll go to the kitchen and do it for you right away." Xiao Fengxian watched her walk away along the winding corridor. The cold winter is gradually fading away, and the spring breeze from the south carries the warmth of the fragrance of flowers, brushing the girl's dress and outlining her waist like a tender willow branch that doesn't fit in a single grip. Until her figure disappeared, Xiao Fengxian lazily withdrew his gaze and said, "Little widow, nobody wants her." Wei Zi cooked a braised fish and then began to cook congee. "My father.in.law has been out doing business these days, and only my mother.in.law Xing and sister.in.law Xiao Duan are at home." Xing Shi glanced critically at the food on the table. "Stewed meat and congee every day, is this still a human life?" Wei Zi, I see you are a lazy person, your hands and feet are rotten, and you can't burn fire to make food. Go out and accuse your mother.in.law of being cruel. Your little hoof will be sunk." Wei Zi waited at the side, and secretly said that she was too hard to cook rice and hard to digest noodles. Now she even dislikes cooking congee. She clearly dislikes it, but she likes eating more than anyone else. So Wei Zi covered her face with a small handkerchief and wept sadly, "Grandma, my daughter.in.law dreamed of her husband again last night. He died so tragically. If he hadn't reincarnated yet, he might have become a water ghost. My daughter.in.law is so sad, how could she be in the mood to cook?" Xing was enraged. Her son, who was a high-ranking official in Chang'an City and married the pearl of the Marquis's hand, had a bright future that was priceless. How could he become a water ghost? This dead girl ran to her yard early in the morning to mourn, what a bad luck. However, she could not tell the truth, so she had to hold her breath and drink congee. Xiao Duan stared at Wei Zi unkindly. She doesn't like Wei Zi. Lingzhou is located in a remote area, surrounded by impoverished mountains and rivers, and it is difficult to produce a great beauty for 100 years. But even in a cheap linen dress, her sister.in.law still couldn't conceal her beauty. "I'm really unhappy." She flashed malice at the bottom of her eyes, but smiled. "I invited several little sisters to the house today to enjoy the flowers. Sister Ruixiang, the daughter of Chen supervisor of the county, was also there. Sister Ruixiang is very elegant, especially likes to eat chili in terms of food. Sister-in-law, when you cook lunch for us, remember to put more chilies in each dish, so as to save Sister Ruixiang's unhappiness." Wei Zi tidied up the dishes and pursed a cold smile from the corner of her lips. In her previous life, it was the same. Chen Ruixiang didn't eat spicy food at all, but Xiao Duan deliberately asked her to add more chili peppers. Chen Ruixiang had a firecracker-like temper, and when she saw a plate of bright red chili peppers, she was so angry that she immediately asked her maid to slap her in the face. She dared not resist, and in the end, she lost face and dignity. Wei Zi knew that Xiao Duan didn't like her, and she didn't like Xiao Duan either. She touched the brass-carved Rui lock collar worn around her neck. This is the collar she wore when she was abducted. She thought it was just a worthless little thing, but later she accidentally discovered that the brass was wrapped in heavy and shiny gold, with intricate patterns carved on it. It turned out to be the token of the Jinhua mansion searching for the lost legitimate daughter. She was just lucky, but before she could recognize her family, she was snatched away by her mother.in.law. She arranged for her sister.in.law to take the collar and pretend to be the eldest daughter of the Jinhua mansion, calling her biological father to be her father. As for her, she was pushed down the dry well by her in-laws with her own hands. In her life, she was beaten and sucked by the Xiao family, and died at the age of only 18. She was despised by the siblings of the Xiao family for a lifetime and also used for a lifetime. They owe her, she wants to retrieve them one by one. Wei Zi lifted her head and stared at Xiao Duan, whose face was covered in water. She smiled and said, "Isn't it just about adding more chili peppers? Don't worry, sister." Wei Zi returned to the kitchen and found that the plate of braised fish she had placed on the stove had been eaten clean, leaving only a complete skeleton. She was relieved. Xiao Fengxian ate her fish, so he shouldn't be making things difficult for her anymore. She tied up her small apron and started cooking, as Xiao Duan had wished, sprinkling a lot of chili peppers on the dishes. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. God of Wealth loves to eat fish. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. God of Wealth loves to eat fish. The garden is surrounded by buildings. 7 or 8 young girls sat together, surrounded by Chen Ruixiang, chatting and laughing. Xiao Duan earnestly peeled nuts for Chen Ruixiang and said, "Sister Ruixiang, I heard that your brother ranked first in the last college exam. He's really impressive. Speaking of which, Chen Gongzi is also at the age of blind dates, isn't he?" Chen Ruixiang glanced at her and casually said, "My mother said, it's not too late for my brother to propose a marriage to him once he has achieved fame. Do you know Xin Chuanxiu, the Minister of Personnel who is returning to Lingzhou City to guard filial piety? In a few days during Qingming, he will go to Yunqian Temple to offer incense. My mother plans to arrange for my brother to meet Shen Shilang by chance at Yunqian Temple and take the opportunity to worship him. With Shen Shilang as a teacher, do you still worry about fame and future prospects?" She paused and glanced at Xiao Duan, indicating, "So, women from small households cannot enter my house." Xiao Duan choked and angrily clenched her handkerchief. "She's just the daughter of a county magistrate, what's there to be arrogant about? Her brother has become the son-in-law of the Marquis of Chongping and holds an official position. She is now also an elegant official lady. Has she ever shown off?" She didn't dare to offend Chen Ruixiang in public, so she had to change the topic with a smile and said, "It's almost noon, and we should also have dinner. Sister Ruixiang, my sister.in.law has great cooking skills. She heard that you're coming today and she's going to make a big table of delicious food for you." Quickly, Wei Zi led 2 old women and came over with a collection box to set up food and dishes. Xiao Duan stretched her neck and saw that every dish she brought out was sprinkled with bright red chili peppers. She also saw Chen Ruixiang's face gradually turning ugly, and couldn't help but feel delighted. Chen Ruixiang is like a proud peacock, who likes to boss people around the world the most. If others don't like her, she will use her identity to fight and curse recklessly. Today, Wei Zi offended her, so there must be no good fruit to eat. The dishes were put on the table, and Wei Zi gave a courtesy. Thank you sisters for taking care of our cuckoo. I'm sorry for my poor reception. Chen Ruixiang is already annoyed. She stared at the table full of chili peppers and threw the tea cup heavily on the table, saying, Xiao Duan, what does your sister in law mean? Didn't you tell her I couldn't eat spicy food? Did she mean it on purpose? Xiao Duan stood up in panic and said, Sister-in-law, didn't I tell you this morning that Sister Ruixiang never eats spicy food? Why? Why do you put so much chili? She turned to Chen Ruixiang again, looking apologetic and saying, Sister Ruixiang, my sister-in-law probably didn't hear clearly. She didn't mean to save your face. Ah, it's strange. I said it several times at the time. Sister-in-law, have you been too tired these days, so you haven't heard it in your heart? Chen Ruixiang sneered. Since you have said it for several times, the deaf should hear it clearly. I see that your sister-in-law is not satisfied with me. I am the daughter of the supervisor of the county. If you are not satisfied with me, you are not satisfied with my father. If you are not satisfied with my father, you are not satisfied with the court. You insult the court officials, come on, give me a hand on her mouth. Xiao Duan was overjoyed. What's a big deal? Smash Wei Zi's face, that would be so satisfying. She was eagerly waiting to watch the good play when Wei Zi smiled slightly. She stepped forward picked up chopsticks, picked up a piece of chili and put it in her mouth. After finishing eating, she said softly, Miss Chen, this chili pepper looks bright red, but it doesn't taste spicy at all. It's a new variety from Chang'an City to Lingzhou, called sweet pepper. Not only does it look good as a side dish, but it also has beauty and beauty benefits when eaten. After she finished speaking, she ate a few more pieces in a row, her face white and smooth, and her breathing was steady, without any signs of spiciness. The other girls were full of curiosity and followed suit, laughing and saying, it's not really spicy. It tastes sour and sweet like fruit. Sister Ruixiang, you can try it too. After hesitating for a moment, Chen Ruixiang took a careful taste and couldn't help but wonder, it's really strange. There are also non-spicy chili peppers in the world. She thought the taste was good and said to Wei Zi, I actually blamed you just now. Wei Zi still smiled brightly. These girls are either rich or expensive, like Xiao Duan who doesn't touch the spring water with 10 fingers, and can't even distinguish between chives, scallions, and garlic. How could they know that there are also many types of chili peppers? She glanced at Xiao Duan. At this moment, her sister-in-law's face turned purple-red, like a ripe eggplant. She came forward with a smile, gently brushed the dust on Xiao Duan's shoulder with her handkerchief, and told her in sister-in-law's voice, these sisters seldom come to our house as guests. You should treat them well. Xiao Duan was extremely angry and pushed her away, muttering in a low voice, I don't know what identity I have in mind. What an elegant lady I am. I called you sister-in-law, really treating myself as sister-in-law. Be careful, I'll ask my mother to kick you out. Wei Zi smiled carelessly and turned to the other girls and said softly, my sister-in-law is still young and pampered, so it's inevitable that children will become angry and yell, which makes everyone laugh. You play first, and I will prepare a dim sum for each of you. When you leave, I will bring it to everyone. The girls quickly thanked and couldn't help feeling regretful for Wei Zi. What do you mean? Xiao Duan is still young, and although she is about the same age as her sister-in-law, the gap between the two is too big. Xiao Duan is so vulgar and vain, but her widowed sister-in-law is particularly beautiful and quiet. Unfortunately, she is an orphan without any parents or brothers. Otherwise, such a girl would be more than enough to be an official wife. Why should she be a widow and bullied in the Xiao family? Xiao Duan noticed the gaze of these people and was almost furious. The person who was wrong today should have been Wei Zi, how could it end up only being oneself unlucky? She sat down at the dinner table, even though she was the host, she was too lazy to entertain these sisters, and just kept crying. In the eyes of everyone, he became even more petty and unable to stand on the stage. Being provoked by Xiao Duan, everyone lost interest in playing. Xiao Duan is not in the mood to see off guests. Wei Zi personally sent them out, took bags of dim sum from Mrs. Liu and sent them to everyone. As Chen Ruixiang approached, she furrowed her willow leaf eyebrows and hesitated. "I dare ask Miss Chen, are you having any holiday with our cuckoo?" Chen Ruixiang was stunned for a moment and said, "What do you mean by that?" "This morning, the cuckoo did remind me to put more chili peppers." Wei Zi pinched her handkerchief. "I thought you little girls loved to play around and deliberately use chili peppers to tease each other, but it's not good if you play too much. That's why I chose sweet peppers. The cuckoo is quite well behaved and won't play tricks on others for no reason, so I wonder if there's any holiday between you and her." Chen Ruixiang was stunned and said on the spot, "Do I have a problem with her? What kind of thing is she? She begged me to play with her. How dare she hold a grudge against me from behind?" Wei Zi quickly smiled and said, "Perhaps I was too worried." Chen Ruixiang gritted her teeth at the gate of Xiao Mansion and said, "What a good Xiao Duan. You wait for me to go to school tomorrow." Wei Zimu angrily rode her onto the carriage and left before returning to the kitchen to cook dinner. While cooking, Wei Zi remembered that Xiao Fengxian loved to eat fish. Speaking of which, he seems to hate the Xiao family quite a bit, otherwise he wouldn't have done such a rebellious and unfilial thing in his past life. As the saying goes, the enemy of an enemy is a friend. Wei Zi suddenly realized that Xiao Fengxian was an ally that could be fought for. He doesn't seem like a son born to the Xiao family at all. Not only is he beautiful in appearance, but he is also intelligent and almost a demon. Not only did he control the court in just a few years, but he also became the wealthiest businessman in the Qin state, holding salt, iron, and transportation, almost monopolizing the economic lifeline of the whole country. Wei Zi wants to make money. Only by having money in her hands can she have the confidence to leave the Xiao family. Close to the water, the tower first gains the moon. Build a good relationship with Xiao Fengxian, and when he is in a good mood, give her any advice, maybe she can make a lot of money. Wei Zi's plan was well planned. He picked up his net bag and went to the pond to catch fish. The god of wealth loves to eat fish. She has to worship the god of wealth with fish. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Sister-in-law wants to learn, I can teach you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Sister-in-law wants to learn, I can teach you. At dusk, colorful clouds are beautiful. Wei Zi took a plate of sweet and sour fillet and stepped into the small study. My second brother likes fish and didn't tell me earlier. I caught a big fish and sent it to my second brother. Before she finished speaking, she froze in place. The small study was in a mess, with old books, shoes, socks, and collars scattered all over the floor. There were various pictures of beautiful women playing around on the walls, and Wei Zi blushed at a glance. Why do young men of this age like to see this kind of picture? Xiao Fengxian sat cross-legged, throwing darts to play with. Yu Guang caught a glimpse of Wei Zi, and as he raised his wrist, a dart accurately shot into her bun. Wei Zi. Dot. She swallowed her saliva and held on to a porcelain plate, saying, "Fish." Xiao Fengxian gestured for her to put it on the short table, without washing her hands, and picked up chopsticks to focus on picking out the fish bones. Wei Zi stood for a moment, bent down to clean up the mess on the ground for him, and casually mentioned, "I heard that on Qingming Day, Shen Shilang, who returned to his hometown to guard filial piety, would go to Yunshan Temple to offer incense." Shen Shilang is knowledgeable and talented, and there are many old acquaintances in the Chang'an officialdom. On the day of offering incense, there will definitely be many scholars coming to him to show their faces and want to worship under his tutelage. Are you also going to try your luck, second brother? In my past life, I worshipped at Yunshan Temple. I heard that almost all the noble children of Lingzhou had gone. Unfortunately, Shen Chuanxiu was not favored by anyone. Instead, when he returned to Chang'an after the end of his filial piety period, he accepted Xiao Lingxiao, a scumbag with a human face and animal heart, as his disciple. Later, Xiao Lingxiao entered the real power center of the Ministry of Personnel at a young age and had a close relationship with Shen Chuanxiu. She revealed the news to Xiao Fengxian in the hope that he could snatch Xiao Lingxiao's position and give him less help in the officialdom in the future. Xiao Fengxian was picking off the fish bones, and the remaining light fell on Wei Zi's body. She was kneeling in the corner, with her back to him, putting books one by one back into the low shelf. She wore a bamboo blue robe today, with a pure white skirt scattered all over the ground, and a rare pure white jasmine flower pinned on her black hair bun. Xiao Fengxian felt that such a sister-in-law was very good, like a person who had come back to life, no longer a pitiful little person who sat alone by the window in the long night like withered wood and ashes, shedding tears. But he also felt that such a girl was like a broken kite, about to break free from this deep mansion and fly to places he couldn't see. Xiao Fengxian suddenly remembered things from his childhood. When Wei Zi was abducted and sold to the Xiao family, she was only a 5-year-old girl. She suffered a serious head injury at the time and couldn't remember anything. She wore 2 small buns, a small red coat, and a round collar, hiding behind a tree. Her small face was pink and jade-carved, and her dark round eyes were filled with tears. Xing Shi thought she was mute, so the kidnapper used a stick to fiercely spank her buttocks. Feeling hurt from the beating, Wei Zi's tears rolled down her face, and she walked out with a sense of grievance. She raised her little finger and made a gesture of good fortune, speaking softly. I can't remember who my parents are, nor where my home is. 12-year-old Xiao Lingxiao's eyes were full of light as he tugged at Xing's sleeve and said, Mom, let's have her. 10 taels of silver. Wei Zi stayed behind. After the kidnapper left, the whole family discovered that Wei Zi was exceptionally delicate and loved to cry. Xiao Lingxiao coaxed her for a moment before losing patience. He took his sister Xiao Duan out to play with peers, while Xiao Gui and Xing Shi were busy making money and didn't care about her life or death. Xiao Fengxian was idle and comforted Wei Zi with a piece of sugar. The little girl hid behind the door with 2 bags of tears in her eyes, bit on a candy block and poked out half a pink face, timidly calling him Phoenix brother. Later on, Wei Zi was tormented by the Xing family every day after staying at the Xiao family. If she doesn't listen a little, she will be beaten and scolded severely. At a young age, she learned to wash clothes, choose vegetables, and sweep the floor. She almost took on half of the household chores, and her delicate demeanor was worn away. She knew in a daze that she would marry Xiao Lingxiao when she grew up, so if she had a little leisure time, she would stumble and follow behind Xiao Lingxiao's buttocks. Her milk chestnut peach blossom eyes seemed to always gaze in Xiao Lingxiao's direction. Xiao Fengxian is unhappy. Why wasn't he hiding something in his eyes, even though it was the little girl he had coaxed? So on an afternoon when the whole family was away, he coaxed Wei Zi out, hired a carriage, and left her alone in the deep mountains and forests 30 miles away from home. Xing thought that Wei Zi had escaped and felt very sorry for the money. He led the whole village to search day and night, finding the town from the village. He searched for 2 whole days but couldn't find anyone. Xiao Fengxian stayed safely at home. There was no longer that little crying bag in the house or yard. He touched the candy in his hand and believed that Wei Zi deserved it. Who made her never see him? He was young but ruthless. He believed that without him in her eyes, it was betrayal. But when the long night fell, he tossed and turned and couldn't fall asleep. He stared at the top of the tent with bloodshot eyes, thinking that the little crying bag was so timid and delicate, just like a bean sprout, and was left alone in the deep mountains and forests. Will it be taken away by the wolf? Will it turn into tears again? Xiao Fengxian didn't sleep well for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he returned to the mountains with blood-red eyes. The little girl still sat under the abandoned banyan tree, obediently holding nearby wild fruits to satisfy her hunger. Tears did indeed wet her collar, and she cried so much that her eyes were red and swollen like small walnuts. I don't know if she cried for 2 whole days. Seeing him appear, her eyes suddenly lit up. She stood up crying, reached out her hand and stumbled towards him, saying, "Brother Fengxian." At that moment his eyes were all over her. Xiao Fengxian is very satisfied. He gave her a candy before carrying her down the mountain and going home. That evening, the setting sun in the mountains was very warm. He stepped on the mossy mountain steps and whispered, "What is Xiao Lingxiao, stupid, stupid, and ugly? Wei Zi, can't you just look at me?" The little girl lay on his shoulder holding half a wild fruit, feeling tired and almost asleep. She replied in a daze, "Brother Fengxian, I'm watching you." Although she said she looked at him, as she grew up, the person hidden in her eyes during those deep and shallow years was still not him. Even became his sister-in-law, whom he could never touch. Scammer. In the small study, Xiao Fengxian's voice was extremely low. Wei Zi looked back at the crumpled books page by page, puzzled, and said, "I didn't lie to you. If you don't believe me, you can go outside and inquire. I'm also thinking about your future." Xiao Fengxian began to eat fish and remained non-committal about his apprenticeship. He stared at Wei Zi's book arrangement with his spare light. He remembered that she had never read a book and did not recognize words, but she actually arranged the books in the order of the dynasty. He said, "Does sister-in-law know how to read?" Wei Zi's movement of organizing the bookshelf paused. In her past life, she wanted to read, and she wanted to go to school with Xiao Duan. However, Xing Shi refused her request on the grounds of, "What kind of book does a widow read? Don't just read recklessly." Later, when Xiao Lingxiao returned home dressed in luxury, he coveted her beauty and was not willing to kill her. He took her to Chang'an, but also found her uneducated and shameful. As a jinshi, he even struggled to speak to her, so she begged the maids in the mansion to teach her how to read and recognize characters. However, no matter how hard she tried, what she got was always disgusted. She wanted to make progress but couldn't understand the rules and regulations. At that time, she thought that Xiao Lingxiao was the most cultured person in the world, so she gave her character to Xiao Lingxiao for advice. However, what she received was not guidance, but rather a mockery that, not everyone deserves to read. Turning her back to Xiao Fengxian, Wei Zi's eyes darkened. She joked to herself, "I don't know how to read, I'm just a little woman who hasn't read a book. My sister-in-law wants to learn, I can teach you." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The sister-in-law's best name achieved. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The sister-in-law's best name achieved. Wei Zi was stunned for a moment. She turned back in surprise and said, "Really?" Her skin was smooth and white without any makeup, and the most outstanding features among her features were those peach blossom eyes. Her pupils showed a rich milky chestnut color, and when she bent her eyes, they brought out a cute and charming sleeping silkworm. However, she used to always lower her head and dare not look at people. Today, when she raised her eyes so high, she inexplicably developed a bit of charm. Xiao Fengxian felt that the honest and wooden sister-in-law seemed to have turned into a little fox. Even he couldn't figure it out. He said, "Take it seriously. There is an opportunity for progress, and Wei Zi will certainly not miss it. Even if she has already learned how to read and recognize characters, she doesn't mind learning it again." She showed gratitude on her face and said, "When your brother was still alive, he often scolded me for being slow and foolish, not knowing how to learn anything, so he refused to teach me. Reading and recognizing characters is such a troublesome thing, and my younger brother really has the time and patience to teach me. I won't cause you any trouble, will I?" She looked so insecure and weak. Xiao Fengxian felt unbearable and pitiful in his heart. He firmly said, "Don't worry, sister.in.law. I will take care of teaching you. Excuse me, younger brother. First, teach me how to write my name." In the study, pens, ink, paper, and inkstones are already made. Xiao Fengxian grinds and says, "Xiao Wei. Wei Zi." Wei Zi curved her peach blossom eyes. "Second brother, my name is not Xiao Wei Shi, my name is Wei Zi." Wei Zi, Xiao Fengxian thought of this name and wrote on the rice paper, Wei Zi is the name of the peony flower and also the famous king of flowers. Her sister.in.law's name has achieved great success. This is the first time in my past and present life that someone has praised my name for its beauty. Wei Zi pursed a smile and picked up a brush to dip it into ink, saying, "Thank you very much." She felt that Xiao Fengxian's handwriting was also excellent, with clear and sharp strokes, like a pine and cypress growing on a cliff. Although she didn't understand the handwriting very well, she felt that it seemed better than Xiao Lingxiao's handwriting. Xiao Fengxian looked at her posture of picking up the pen and then stared at her writing on rice paper, unable to help but squint and say, "Has sister.in.law learned how to write?" Wei Ziyun's pen became stiff and soon deliberately wrote a winding and trembling stroke. "However, I often read your elder brother's copywriting, and I have slightly understood the trick of picking up and writing." Xiao Fengxian held his cheek with one hand and looked at the woman beside him. She is lying. Although pretending to be clumsy, the strokes on the paper are fundamentally foundational. After a while, Xiao Fengxian suddenly took out a book from the box and said, "Does sister.in.law really not recognize characters?" Wei Zi didn't even lift her head and said, "Why am I lying to you? Only when my sister.in.law can read this book word by word without changing her expression, can I trust you." Wei Zi curiously took the book and her gaze froze as soon as it fell on the first line. "Where did you get this dirty notebook? What obscene words and songs are written above?" Xiao Fengxian tilted his head and innocently blinked Dan Fengyan, saying, "Why doesn't sister.in.law look down?" Wei Ziqiang pretended to be calm. "Isn't it just a notebook for talking about love between men and women? Under her skin, there is a 20-year-old soul hidden, and she has not experienced sexual affairs before. What is there to be ashamed of?" She forced herself to look down, deliberately blurring her gaze and not asking herself to read those words, but those words and songs seemed to have vitality and entered her eyes. Only when she saw the 5 or 6 elements did Wei Zi's face start to heat up. Xiao Fengxian suppressed a smile and said, "Since I can't read, why is sister.in.law's face turning red?" Wei Zi endured the embarrassment and bit her lips lightly with a tremble. She is the eldest sister.in.law, and her soul is several years older than Xiao Fengxian. How could she be held hostage by him instead? Even if I deceive him into not recognizing words, what if she is an elder? With this in mind, she frowned and threw the book into Xiao Fengxian's arms. She stood up and reprimanded in the tone of her elders, saying, "I only read these things at a young age and don't focus on my career. I'll confiscate them all for you someday." Xiao Fengxian laughed heartily and said, "I'm afraid my sister.in.law will confiscate it. I'll hide and sneak a peek." "You." The lights were shining brightly. Wei Zi was extremely embarrassed and distressed. Her white jade-like cheeks were tinged with a bright red blush, and even her thin eyelids were tinged with a rosy hue. Although she had not applied any powder, she presented a natural beauty. She has been crying since she was young, crying when she was wronged, crying when she was bullied, and crying when she was embarrassed. At this moment, being teased by Xiao Fengxian, I couldn't help but cover my face and sob. "You bully people." Xiao Fengxian secretly said that at this moment, she seemed like a girl of her age. It's just the death of an arranged marriage husband, who hasn't even had a successful marriage and doesn't have much emotional attachment. There's nothing to be sad about, let alone the reason to be a widow for him for the rest of his life. Xiao Fengxian laughed enough and saw Wei Zi stomping her feet to leave. She quickly grabbed her sleeve and said, "Sister-in-law, don't cry. I'll burn it all tomorrow." Wei Zi blushed and her hoarse voice was tinged with a hint of coquettishness. "So, do you still teach me how to write?" "Teach?" Xiao Fengxian didn't hesitate, and the ending even had a helpless gentle coaxing. Wei Zi broke her tears and turned into a smile. She sat down again and peered at the young man beside her with her spare light. He was born handsome and liked to read pictures of beautiful women like an ordinary teenager. Occasionally, he would skip classes and skip school, and he would also hide some embarrassing notebooks under his desk. He has flesh and blood, and he is even more warm than the people in this house. What exactly did he experience to become like in his past life? Even committing such a heinous act of killing one's father and brother, Wei Zi became somewhat curious and somewhat distressed towards Xiao Fengxian. She put on the airs of a sister-in-law and earnestly taught, "I haven't given up on myself, and you can't give up on yourself either. The matter of going to Yunshan Temple to pay respects during Qingming festival. Second brother, Shen Shilang is a knowledgeable person who guides you on the right path. You can't miss it." Xiao Fengxian sneered. "My sister-in-law has been bullied so much that she even wants him to be a good person. But if he hadn't stolen or robbed in these years, he would have starved to death by the Xing family." Faced with the expectant gaze of the young widow, Xiao Fengxian perfunctorily said, "I know, I'll just go." Before Wei Zi left, Xiao Fengxian gave her a set of pens, ink, paper, and inkstones, and also gave her a large calligraphy book he had written before. "Sister-in-law, keep it hidden, don't let them discover it." The boudoir where Wei Zi lived was very remote, and no one would disturb her at night. She returned to the room and lit 2 more candles. She placed the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone on the table, covered Xiao Fengxian's large characters with thin and transparent paper, and carefully drew red strokes. A small study. Xiao Fengxian slowly lit a fire, put on a skewered fresh fish, tore open the pages of the little book that Wei Zi didn't want him to read, and threw it all into the fire. Xiao Fengxian was eating grilled fish when she saw the dim candlelight in the opposite room. The figure of the girl sitting by the window was graceful and delicate, like a dodder vine with no branches to rely on. At night, there was a spring rain, and the garden was rustling with the sound of rain. Even the room was a bit cold. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulder and continued to write at her desk. As the east gradually turned white, she wrote all night long. The next day, in the morning, Xiao Fengxian was still sleeping when Wei Zi pushed the door in and said, "Second brother. Long time no see, new book reports." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Too soft. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Too soft. Xiao Fengxian opened his eyes, with dark pupils and red blood streaks. He just fell asleep for less than an hour. Wei Zi was stunned for a moment and said, "Second brother, you don't need a good bamboo bed. Why do you sleep on the ground instead?" "There are no bedding on the ground, how cold it is." Xiao Fengxian's voice was hoarse. "You mind me." For many years, the Xiao family ignored him and he slept until noon every day, waking up naturally. Today, when Wei Zi woke him up, he was suddenly full of displeasure. As the saying goes, a year's plan comes in spring, and a day's plan comes in the morning. Wei Zi opened the flower window for him, and the soft spring sun immediately shone in. The garden outside the window was as green as a wash. "Second brother, you're going to see Shen Shilang in a few days, so you need to get up and read more books. I wrote a few words last night, could you help me take a look?" The sunlight was dazzling, and Xiao Fengxian was forced to sit up and take the words she handed over. He finished reading them one by one and looked up at Wei Zi. The little widow knelt across from him, her fingers gripping her skirt, her peach blossom eyes wide open, her milk chestnut-colored pupils filled with anticipation, her full cheeks tinged with peony juice, exuding a natural blush, with a delicate and deceitful appearance. He paused and said, "It's too soft." Wei Zi was stunned and said, "What? The pen is too soft." Xiao Fengxian returned the big characters to her and instinctively turned his head to look away. "Seeing the characters is like a person, my sister.in.law's heart is too soft." Wei Zi held the character and pondered for a moment, then compared it with Xiao Fengxian's character and said clearly, "I was just deliberately imitating your strokes, but the writing is soft and lacks any character." Xiao Fengxian propped up his cheeks. He, as a widowed sister.in.law, may not have read many books, but she has a good understanding. Wei Zi received guidance and put away the few large characters, saying, "Can you ask my second younger brother another question?" "Sister-in-law, please speak. How can I earn 100 taels of silver?" "What does sister.in.law need 100 taels of silver for?" Wei Zi secretly said that 100 taels of silver was neither too much nor too much, enough for her to spend money in the capital in the future. She didn't want to tell Xiao Fengxian her secret, so she said half truthfully and half falsely, "I've always been under someone else's supervision, and my heart is never at ease. If I had 100 taels by my side, I would be much more at ease." Xiao Fengxian sneered. 100 taels can make you feel at ease. He went out to drink flower wine once, but it wasn't enough to casually reward people. He took out a purse from the box and threw it in front of Wei Zi, saying, "Here." The purse was heavy, and when Wei Zi opened it, there was actually 100 taels of silver inside. She was stunned and said, "Where did you get the money from?" Xiao Fengxian casually said, "The transportation, ships, and gambling houses in the Lingzhou area are all mine." "Blow it off." Wei Zi didn't believe it and returned the wallet to him. "It must have been saved by you through frugality over the years." "I don't want it. Second brother, I want to earn money myself, so I can feel at ease." Xiao Fengxian felt that this little widow was too foolish. Leaving him on this shortcut and wanting to make money on his own is not foolishness, but what is it? He thought for a moment and said, "If you want to earn 100 taels, you can do it by doing a small business. I see a new type of tofu popular in Lingzhou City, which is soaked in green alum and then marinated in brine. After marinating, pour tea oil into the pot and boil it red. Fry the tofu until it turns brown, then sprinkle it with chili oil, soy sauce oil, and sesame oil. It's spicy, salty, and fragrant, and very popular. No one in Shaanxi County sells this type of tofu yet. If my sister.in.law is the first to sell it, she can naturally make money." Selling tofu. Wei Zi pondered deeply. Although it may sound unreliable, she believes in Xiao Fengxian's ability to make money. She blushed and said, "So. Can you lend me some capital?" Xiao Fengxian was surprised and said, "My sister.in.law has neither the idea of making money nor the capital. She talked to me for a long time, and it turns out she's just trying to trick a white wolf with nothing." Wei Zi coughed apologetically and grabbed her skirt to conceal her embarrassment. Xiao Fengxian bent his fingers and lightly kowtowed on the table before suddenly saying, "If I help my sister.in.law, what benefits can she give me?" Wei Zi looked at his cuffs. The cuffs were worn and hairy, and the black robe on his body was already very old. She smiled and said, "I did a good job of needlework. Can I make a new garment for my second brother? When I went to Yunshan Temple to see Shen Shirlang on Qingming Festival, my second brother happened to be able to put it on, so it's not a loss of dignity." Xiao Fengxian originally only wanted her to make fish for him to eat. Hearing new clothes on, I couldn't help but smile and say, "Deal." By the way, Wei Zilin suddenly looked back as he was leaving, "I'm wearing chains on my feet and can't get out of the house. When the tofu is ready, I'll have to trouble my younger brother to sell it for me." Xiao Fengxian. Tell him to sell tofu. What grade is he going to sell tofu? Will he still be ashamed to be seen by acquaintances? So the idea of making money was his idea, the capital was borrowed from him, and in the end, he had to come forward and sell goods. So what did she do? Wei Zi has already run away. Xiao Fengxian refused to sell tofu, so he simply bought a storefront and bought 2 maids to sell for Wei Zi. The ingredients were secretly purchased and sent to the kitchen by someone early on. After all this fuss, he has invested more than 100 taels of capital. Wei Zi put on a small apron and started making tofu according to Xiao Fengxian's instructions. By the time it was pickled, it was already evening. Wei Zi picked up tofu from the brine, and the white and tender tofu turned black, emitting a strange odor. Wei Zi was so smoked that she covered her nose and threw pieces of black tofu into an oil pan for deep frying from a distance across the stove. She couldn't help but mutter softly, "This thing smells so bad, can it really be eaten?" She was bursting with joy, and Xiao Duan happened to be back from school. "Wei Zi! Wei Zi! You bitch, get out of here!" she shouted and drank as she headed straight to the kitchen. Chen Ruixiang probably listened to Wei Zi's provocation. Today, she deliberately combined with other sisters to make a stumbling block for her, causing her to be beaten by the master. Now her right hand is still red and swollen. It's all Wei Zi's fault. Wei Zi, you despicable person. As soon as Xiao Duan stepped into the kitchen, she smelled a foul smell and quickly covered her nose before retreating. She cursed in disgust and said, "Wei Zi, what a respectable and elegant family we are. You stink so much, and you're going to explode shit." Wei Zi felt that her tofu had been offended. She took off her apron and walked out. "What's up with you looking for me?" Xiao Duan was furious and said, "Let me ask you, what did you say to Chen Ruixian yesterday? Did you speak ill of me behind my back?" "No." Before Wei Zi could finish speaking, Xiao Duan picked up a water ladle and scooped up a bucket of cold water from the water tank in the corridor, without hesitation splashing it on her face. Wei Zi was startled and instinctively took a half-step back. "Bitch!" Xiao Duan gritted her teeth, "Who else could you be? You've grown up eating rice from my house these years, and you don't know how to be grateful and become a cow or a horse. You dare to go against me, an elegant and serious young lady. I tell you, it's only for my brother's sake that you're allowed to stay at my house, otherwise you would have been driven to the street to beg for food. If you dare to chew your tongue behind your back and make a stumbling block, it's not water that splashes on your face." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Little Widow Becomes a Bit Bad. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The little widow becomes a bit bad. Wei Zi leaned sideways, clenching her fists and covering her chest. A few strands of raven green hair were wet and pressed against her cheeks, making her small face as white as fine porcelain. Perhaps frightened, a petal-like moist blush appeared on her cheeks. She lifted her eyelashes with a hint of timidity, trembling. Her milky chestnut-colored pupils were shrouded in mist, and she looked like a pure white jasmine that could withstand wind and rain. I still pity her when I see her. She stared at Xiao Duan and said softly, "I didn't speak ill of you behind your back." Xiao Duan gritted her teeth. "A slut is just being sentimental, but pour a bucket of water on her and look at her pitiful behavior." However, upon closer examination, Wei Zi, this despicable person, has always been weak and timid. Over the years, she has been diligent and obedient, and is often scared to tears by her mother's scolding. She probably doesn't dare to speak ill of her. Chen Ruixiang's temper may be due to her poor hospitality yesterday. She thought about it and warned Wei Zi, "Don't put on such a pitiful posture in front of me. Who are you trying to seduce? You stayed at my house just to do work. I have never treated you as my sister. In law. You are not cultured or elegant, and you are not even worthy of lifting my brother's shoes. A person like you who has no father or mother is only worthy of serving people." Wei Zi lowered her eyelashes, covering the coldness in her eyes. Tears streamed down her face as she choked up, pretending to be aggrieved. I have all my heart for brother Xiao. He also paid his respects seriously when he was alive. Why am I not your sister? Law anymore. Xiao Duan dislikes it. Her elder brother became the son-in-law of a powerful official, and her sister-in-law was the apple of the eye of the marquis's mansion in Chongping. Her golden branches and jade leaves were priceless, not Wei Zi, a despicable person without a father or mother. Wei Zi sobbed again and said, I'm afraid brother Xiao will be sad and upset when he hears your words under the 9 springs. He even feels uneasy about reincarnation. If he turns into a fierce ghost in a fit of anger, how can he be good? Xiao Duan was very angry. Her brother hasn't even died, who's going to turn into a fierce ghost? Saying these curses in the blue sky and white sun doesn't seem unlucky. I really want to tear apart Wei Zi's mouth. However, she couldn't reveal the truth and could only slap her face with a grim expression. I didn't say anything good when I called you. I'll kill you. Wei Zi quickly avoided. Xiao Duan caught off guard, leaned forward, stumbled under her feet, and fell straight down the corridor. She knocked over the wooden frame under the corridor, on which several pots of brine marinated with stinky tofu were placed, and the thick brown brine immediately poured Xiao Cuckoo all over her head and body. Ah 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 ah. Xiao Duan collapsed and screamed, as if stomping on a hot iron plate, almost fainting from the stench, and then frantically pulling down spices such as fragrant leaves and star anise stuck to her hair. Wei Zi lifted her sleeve to cover her mouth and nose, took 2 steps back, and said, Sister, you stink. Xiao Duan cried bitterly and scratched Wei Zi with open teeth and claws, saying, It's all you scumbag, who brought out these stinky things. Wei Zi leaned behind the door, her milky chestnut peach blossom eyes innocent. Sister, don't rush to hit me. Let's go take a shower as soon as possible. If you catch this smell and can't wash it off, it will be troublesome. Xiao Duan heard that she couldn't wash it off, so she cried even more and crawled back to her room to take a shower. Wei Zimu watched her run away and couldn't help but shake her head, praising, It's really too elegant. After Xiao Duan left, Wei Zi returned to the kitchen to plate the tofu, and Xiao Fengxian came with a fresh fish. He said, Sister-in-law, I want to eat tonight. Before finishing a sentence, he lifted his sleeve to cover his mouth and nose and stood outside the threshold, saying, Sister-in-law, the pickled vegetables you pickled are also very smelly. Wei Zi saw him as if he saw a savior. What pickled vegetables? This is tofu. I made it according to your method, and it tastes like this. It's just out of the pot, come and taste it. Xiao Fengxian sneered, I won't taste it. He heard people say that this kind of tofu is fresh, spicy, and salty, but he never heard of it smelling so bad. Tofu doesn't have any odor, maybe it's because his sister-in-law didn't do it well. Wei Zi held the plate of tofu. At least it was made with a lot of effort, can't we just pour it out without tasting it? What if it tastes good? However, she herself refused to taste it at all, so she sincerely said, Second brother, this kind of tofu smells bad and tastes good. I just tasted it and it's really delicious. You should eat it while it's hot. Xiao Fengxian stared at the plate of tofu. His widowed sister-in-law has always been honest and should not lie to deceive him. So he picked up bamboo chopsticks, picked up a piece of tofu, and put it in his mouth. Wei Zi looked forward to. How about it? Can it be sold? Xiao Fengxian raised his eyebrows. Biting through tofu, only the skin of the tofu is black. It tastes crispy and delicious because it has been fried, while the tofu meat is snow-white and tender. After being soaked in soy sauce, it is mellow, salty and tender, making it a very appetizing snack. He said, not bad. Wei Zi carefully tasted half of the piece after making sure it was safe to eat. Xiao Fengxian looked at her expression with a sharp gaze and said, how did I look? Did my sister.in-law test me for drugs just now? Wei Zi almost choked. She didn't dare to offend Xiao Fengxian, so she swallowed the tofu and picked up the fresh fish, breaking away from the topic. Second brother, do you want to drink fish soup tonight? Do you want to drink tofu carp soup, or do you want to drink yam carp soup? I have to kill the fish. You go out quickly. Xiao Fengxian refused to let her go. She grabbed her sleeve in front of the stove and said, "You dare not eat these stinky tofu, but test me for poison. I tested you for poison, then you go report to the authorities." Wei Zi saw that he couldn't get away with it and looked up at him like a fool. Go report to the authorities, arrest me, and put me in jail. She was wearing a bamboo blue cross neck jacket, holding a fish, and the fish's tail swayed between the two. Crystal clear water droplets splashed onto her snow-white face, and a water droplet happened to fall between her raven green eyelashes. She couldn't help but blink, and that water droplet was like a teardrop that was about to drip. Poor and innocent. Even if she admitted to testing him for poison, it made Xiao Fengxian inexplicably feel that she had been wronged. Xiao Fengxian's speechless kung fu was pushed out of the kitchen by Wei Zi. When he stood in the corridor and regained his senses, the kitchen door had already been closed. He ground his teeth. How does he feel about this little widow? Has it become a bit bad? It's night. Wei Zi finished her work and was about to practice calligraphy when Xiao Duan suddenly approached with a bundle in her arms. She closed the door like a thief and placed the package on the table, saying, "Hey, you're also idle. Make a piece of clothing for me these days, and I'll take it as a gift. The fabric is all here, and I've written the size on the paper." Wei Zi curiously untied the bundle. The fabric is good, but the color doesn't match what the little girl is wearing. She glanced at the size and said, "What do men wear?" "Shoo." Xiao Duan nervously glanced at the direction of the doors and windows. "In a few days, it will be Qingming. Lord Chen is going to visit Shenshurlang at Yunshan Temple, and he will definitely need a good outfit. I deliberately tricked my mother's academy into charging for extra classes, so I got 5 taels of silver to buy these good materials. Your needlework is better than the embroidery outside, so I asked you to make a robe for him to wear. Then I personally gave it to him and said it was done by me. Thank you for the reward of 91,666. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Surprisingly, he dares to pretend to be his sister-in-law. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Surprisingly, he dares to pretend to be his sister-in-law. Xiao Duan couldn't help but smile shyly as she thought about her crush. Remembering that Wei Zi was still present, she quickly put on a stern face and threatened, "If you dare to say this, I'll tear your mouth apart." Wei Zi secretly said that Xiao Duan, an unmarried daughter of Yun Ying's boudoir, learned a lot, but secretly rushed to deliver clothes to men. It was really embarrassing to say so. She said slowly, "I have to do laundry, cook, and sweep the yard during the day. I'm already tired enough. If I light up and do needlework at night, I'm afraid I won't be able to wake up in the morning and my eyes won't be able to handle it. What a lazy bone." Xiao Duan scolded softly, "You don't need to worry about breakfast in the future. I'll ask the women to cook, and you just need to focus on making your clothes. If you can please Prince Chen, I will naturally give you benefits. If Prince Chen doesn't like it, Wei Zi, be careful of your skin." Wei Zidao said, "Miss Duan has a crush on you. I'm really happy for you, but unfortunately your brother passed away young and I can't see you getting married." Xiao Duan gritted her teeth. "Whose brother passed away young? What a bad luck." Wei Zi continued, "On Qingming Day, did you also go to Yunshan Temple, Duan?" "Of course, I have to go see Mr. Chen." Wei Zi rubbed the pile of fabric. Xiao Fengxian is still just a young and immature boy, with an unpredictable style of behavior. The scheming city mansion is not as profound and terrifying as it will be in the future, and he is afraid that he may not be able to handle Shenshurlang. She had to follow and ensure that Xiao Fengxian could be taken in by Shenshurlang, squeezing out Xiao Lingxiao's position. Her revenge cannot be flawed. With this in mind, she sincerely said, "Can I be with you? I want to put an incense stick in front of the Buddha for your brother, to bless him with a good pregnancy in his next life. On the way back and forth, we can also have some care. Don't worry, I promise not to tell anyone about you giving Qinggongzi clothes, even my mother.in.law won't tell." Xiao Duan hesitates. She went to Yunshan Temple to worship Buddha and offer incense as a little girl, and then went alone to find Mr. Chen. She plunged into the pile of men, which would definitely arouse curiosity and suspicion. Bringing Wei Zi's sister.in.law along as an excuse to offer incense to my elder brother is indeed not eye-catching. She nodded reluctantly and said, "Okay, then don't run around and provoke trouble for me." Wei Zi took the opportunity and said, "It's not convenient for me to wear handcuffs. Can you see if it's possible?" Xiao Duan impatiently said, "You're such a troublemaker. If I let you go out, it would be considered lenient. Why are you so unsatisfied and still want to untie the shackles? My mother said, you're young and widowed, so if you can't keep your guard, you'll have to lock the shackles to avoid opening your legs when you see a man. Wei Zi, you better be honest and don't think of any devilish ideas from me." After speaking, he snorted lightly and shook his face away. Wei Zi touched the shackles on her feet. Xiao Duan is not too foolish, she acted too hastily. However, this pair of shackles will be taken off by her sooner or later. The girl suppressed the chill in her eyes and unfolded the cloth brought by Xiao Duan. Xiao Duan had never done any needlework before and didn't know how much fabric was needed to cut a piece of clothing. The fabric she sent was enough to fit 2 bodies. Wei Zi meticulously divided the fabric and planned to borrow flowers to offer to Buddha, cutting a piece for Xiao Fengxian as well. It's a perfect way to save some money. 3 days later at dusk, Wei Zi went to find Xiao Fengxian with her prepared clothes and newly practiced handwriting. A small study. Xiao Fengxian flipped through the big characters written by Wei Zi one by one and circled a few that were quite good. Sister-in-law has boundless strength and is very brave when killing fish. How come writing is always soft and smooth? After practicing for 3 days, only these few characters can barely read. Wei Zi blushed and argued, "Who is so powerful and brave? Why is second brother talking nonsense? It's you, you're about to go see Shenshurlang. Have you read all your books?" Every time she meets Xiao Fengxian, "This guy is not studying. I don't know how I got into Tanhualang in my past life. Sister-in-law, not everyone needs to study hard in the cold window." Xiao Fengxian raised his hand and nodded at his own brain. "Don't forget what you read, do you understand? Those white-haired scholars who only got into the scholar and scholar exams are just rotten wood and useless. Youth is reckless. If these words are released, I don't know how many people will be jealous and resentful." Unfortunately, Wei Zi knew that Xiao Fengxian had arrogant abilities. She glanced at the handwriting casually written by Xiao Fengxian. Iron paintings, silver hooks, and swift strokes are indeed hundreds of times stronger than her words. People are really more popular than others. No matter how hard she tries in her life, she may not be able to match him by 3 points. As if peeking through her thoughts, Xiao Fengxian comforted, "Sister-in-law, don't be angry. Even if you can only learn my handwriting by 3 points, it's still a level of praise from everyone." Wei Zi. This is not comfort, clearly boasting. Xiao Fengxian saw that she was still unhappy and continued to coax her, saying, "There is something short and something long, and my sister.in.law also has something stronger than me." Wei Zi's eyes lit up and she said, "For example." "For example, when sister.in.law says cry, cry, this skill is not possessed by everyone." Wei Zi. The dog can't spit out ivory from its mouth, she actually hopes to get comfort from Xiao Fengxian. She silently put away her words and shook off the burden she had brought, saying, "Here, the clothes I promised to make for you have already been made. Please try where they don't fit, and I'll take them back and make some changes." In this life, no one has ever made clothes for Xiao Fengxian. When he was a child, he picked up clothes that Xiao Lingxiao didn't want to wear. As he grew up, he made his own money to buy ready-made clothes from the clothing store. He was in a good mood and changed behind the screen. He walked out to show Wei Zi, sister-in-law, "Take a look. It is a dark black round-necked robe, embroidered with a phoenix pattern on the cuffs and collar with dark green silk thread, exuding a low-key luxury. The round neckline reveals a snow-white cross collar lining, and the wide leather belt of one finger outlines the young man's slim waist, making it even more upright like pine and bamboo. He had a smile in his eyes and brows, rarely revealing a hint of youthful innocence. In Wei Zi's eyes, she almost forgot that he would be a cruel and ruthless traitor in the future. He looked just an obedient and sensible neighbor brother, showing off his new clothes. She knelt down and smiled gently like an elder sister, saying, "A young man of your age naturally looks good in anything you wear." Xiao Fengxian was dissatisfied and said, "Does sister-in-law think that others look just as good in it?" Wei Zi wanted to nod and say yes, but when she met Xiao Fengxian's unfriendly gaze, she dared not say anything. Xiao Fengxian refused to give up and said, "Does sister-in-law think who is better looking, Xiao Lingxiao or me?" Wei's Excellency, this person is not very old and loves beauty very much. He even competes with his brother for beauty. She suddenly remembered an article she had read before, called, "Zhou Ji's Lament on King Qi's Advice." Zhou Ji dressed in court attire and asked his wife, concubine, and guests who was more beautiful than Su Gong in the north of the city. All three of them said he was more beautiful than Su Gong, but Zhou Ji looked in the mirror and felt that he was far behind Su Gong. So he advised the king of Qi, saying that his wife favored him, his concubines feared him, and his guests praised him for being more beautiful than Su Gong made against his will. The king of Qi was even more powerful than him, and his concubines, courtiers, and the people of the world all favored, feared, and sought after him. This shows that the king of Qi was deceived even more than he was. So the king of Qi ordered to seek wisdom and accept advice, humbly accepting criticism and advice from others. Soon, the state of Qi became a powerful country. Wei Zi originally wanted Xiao Fengxian to take the right path, but secretly thought, "Isn't this a good opportunity to educate him?" So she put on a sister-in-law demeanor and said, "My second younger brother has read an article called Zhou Gui's Lament on King Qi's Advice. I only want to hear good words, but I don't know they will only deceive you. You are still young now, so you should be humble and listen to your elders' and masters' words more often. In the future, you will become a kind-hearted and good official." Her mouth was babbling, and Xiao Fengxian didn't hear a word. She refused to answer directly, proving that in her heart, Xiao Lingxiao was more good-looking than him. How do her eyes grow? What kind of empty and heartfelt nonsense? Over the years, he has been crooked in order to survive. It's ridiculous that after coaxing the little widow for a few days, she drifted away and dared to pretend to be his sister-in-law. Stupid to the extreme. Xiao Fengxian sneered, "After reading some books, my sister-in-law ran up to me to show off her knowledge. You're not my wife, nor are you my concubine, nor are you my guest. Just ask you a question about who looks good, and you keep talking so much nonsense. Even though the old man in the Xiao family doesn't care about me, you have started to discipline me. My sister-in-law likes to stay at home with a kind heart, but unfortunately her husband Xiao Lingxiao is not a kind-hearted person either." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. He also became the one who bullied her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. He also became the one who bullied her. After he finished speaking, he took off the outer robe without hesitation and threw it on the floor in front of Wei Zi. Wei Zi's cheeks were burning with waves of heat. He said she showed off her knowledge. Her fingers on her lap curled and trembled slightly, indicating that she was meddling. Yes, they have no blood relationship or sister-in-law relationship. She will eventually leave the Xiao family. How cruel and cruel he will be in the future, how he will kill his father and brother, how many people will curse him. What does it have to do with her? Wei Zi stood up and said with grievance, "You are a genius who never forgets. You have read any books, and your future prospects are precious. Naturally, you don't need me to give you any guidance. If you think I talk too much, then I won't talk to you in the future." She bowed and turned around with red eyes before leaving. I was just a little anxious when I stepped out of the threshold, got caught in foot handcuffs, and fell to the ground in embarrassment. She quickly supported the door frame and climbed up, walking without looking back. Xiao Fengxian stood alone in the small study. The sky is dusk, and the garden is desolate. He saw the window across from him being lowered, and a tung oil lamp was lit in the boudoir. The figure of my sister-in-law was reflected behind the window screen. She lay on the table, probably crying out of anger, her delicate shoulders trembling violently. Xiao Fengxian knew that everyone in this house loved to bully her. She used to be weak, and when she was bullied, all she knew was to hide in her boudoir and cry. These days she seems to have learned to be a little stronger, but tonight she started crying again. He still made me cry. He also became the one who bullied her. Xiao Fengxian bent down to pick up the robe, carefully touching it. The stitches were continuous and dense, and the embroidery was exquisite and beautiful. There was not a single place that was perfunctory. This is the clothes she worked hard to make after staying up for 3 nights. Xiao Fengxian tightly clenched his clothes, recalling the scene he had just thrown on the ground without hesitation, and the sadness that flashed through Wei Zi's eyes. Somehow, his palms were burning hot and his chest was also blocked. The next day, Xiao Gui returned from doing business outside and brought back Xing Qianri, the nephew of the Xing family. Xing Qianri is the only child of Xing's elder brother. Over the years, he has been doing business with Xiao Guixue, but has not learned any serious skills. Instead, he has learned a lot of skills in gambling, drinking, and wandering around the kiln. He really thought that Xiao Lingxiao had died, and that no one in the Xiao family would inherit the family business. He only waited for the death of Xiao Gui and Xing in the future, and all the Xiao family's property would belong to him. Therefore, he loved to run to the Xiao family when he had something to do, and even when he saw something valuable, he loved to take it from the Xing family. The Xing family had a fondness for their mother's family and sympathized with Xing Qianri, who was the only child of their Xing family. They never cared about him, and he was even more arrogant and domineering, even becoming lustful towards Wei Zi. Wei Zi is making stinky tofu in the kitchen, and Xing Qianri comes straight to him. He is also studying, and in pursuit of elegance, he specially wears a scholar's hat. Because he dislikes not being beautiful enough, he also puts a small red flower in his temples. He said attentively, "Little Z, I haven't seen you these days. Do you miss me? Look, what good things have I brought you." He took out a jade hairpin from his arms and offered it to Wei Zi like a treasure. Wei Zi despised it. In her past life, it was the same. This humanoid beast always pestered her when no one was around, and several times he almost took advantage of her. Later, Xiao Duan ran into her, but Xing Qianri said that she deliberately seduced him. Xing was so angry that she grabbed her hair and scolded her in public as a little whore. She led all good men to be spoiled by her. She asked the women to beat her 20 sticks. She was so bloody that she could not get up. She lay alone in the rainstorm moaning and crying all night. That night, Xing Qianri, who claimed to love her, didn't even show his face. Seeing Xing Qianri again, Wei Zi felt a faint pain and itching all over her body. Through her clothes, she instinctively rubbed her arms. Reborn, she had not yet seen those wounds on her body, but those wounds had already deeply imprinted in her heart. Once lifted, they were like chilblains that recur every winter, unbearable pain and itching. Xing Qianrui couldn't help feeling proud when she shuddered for a moment. He took 2 steps closer and lowered his voice vaguely. "What is little purple sister afraid of? Xiao Lingxiao is dead, and my aunt can't let Xiao Fengxian's wild seed inherit the family business, so I will have the final say in the future. Little purple sister has been widowed since she was young. How lonely and pathetic she is. She doesn't want to just follow me and let me hurt you, eh?" The little widow trapped by him on the stove, wearing a bamboo blue cross-collar jacket and a cloud-like single-screw bun, has a delicate and fair face. At first glance, it is only beautiful, but upon closer inspection, it is stunning, like a pure white jasmine in a spring rain in the depths of an alley. Perhaps forced by him, she lowered her small face and occasionally trembled her eyelashes, lifting her peach blossom eyes to peek at him. Her various graceful and delicate expressions were even more pitiful than the most charming courtesan woman Xing Qianrui had ever seen. The spring breeze blew in through the screen window behind her, bringing out the faint sweetness on the little widow's body. Xing Qianrui's gaze couldn't help but fall on Wei Zi's collar, a hint of condensed white swirling down her neck, mesmerizing her soul. The sweet fragrance must have emanated from her body. Xing Qianrui's throat tightened in waves. Fortunately, his unlucky cousin died, otherwise this stunning appearance would not have been his turn. He couldn't bear it any more and hugged Wei Zi's slender waist, saying, "It's been a while since I last saw you. Why is Xiaozi's younger sister even more beautiful? She just seems to have lost some weight. Why don't you let her brother hug her and try the weight?" He was about to embrace with both hands when Wei Zi suddenly lifted the lid of the pot. The pot was filled with stinky tofu that had been stewed all night, and the stink suddenly rose to the sky. Ouch! Xing Qianrui was caught off guard and let out a dry vomit. He covered his mouth and struggled to escape to the outside of the kitchen. He took a deep breath of fresh air and quickly slowed down in embarrassment. He looked at the kitchen with fear and said, "Little purple sister, why do you want to cook a pot of cow dung? It almost stinks to my death." Wei Zi once again felt that her tofu had been offended. Xing Qianrui is cow dung, and his whole family is cow dung. She thought to herself and picked up a spatula to stir up the tofu in the brine, saying lightly, "But it's just a few salted fish marinated. Where does it smell so bad? If cousin finds it smelly, please go somewhere else." Death under the peony, being a ghost is also charming. With the little beauty in front of him, Xing Qianrui couldn't bear to leave. He covered his nose and forced himself to step into the kitchen again. However, the foul smell hit his face again, causing him to quickly take a few steps back. He couldn't bear it anymore and waved his hand, saying, "I still have to go talk to my aunt. Little purple sister, I'll come see you another day." Nauseous. He ran away with a stomach twitch. That's right. Wei Zi spat at his back, picked up the jade hairpin he had thrown on the stove, and without hesitation smashed it to the ground. "I don't want anything from a stinky man." Xiao Fengxian leaned against the door with his arms in his arms. He glanced at the scattered green on the ground. She didn't want what the stinky man gave her, but she accepted all the pens, ink, paper, and inkstones he gave her. It is evident in her heart that he is different from others. The corner of the boy's lips unconsciously curved. He came to seek peace today, but couldn't lower his face, so he pretended to be proud and lengthened his tone. "Sister-in-law, why don't you make me fish today?" Wei Zi seemed unable to see him and continued to bow her head in busyness. The kitchen fell into an eerie silence. Xiao Fengxian tugged at his collar, feeling a hint of unease in his heart. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Cheating the Little Widow into his home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Cheating the little widow into his home. After a moment, Wei Zi picked up a dustpan and went to the yard to dry the vegetables. Second young master is blocking the door. Xiao Fengxian stood at the door, motionless. She actually called him second young master. He looked down and said, "What does sister.in-law mean? Do you have to be so separated from me?" Wei Zi smiled slightly and said, "I'm not your wife, I'm not your concubine, I'm not your guest. Why should I be close to you? I'm just a rural widow, I haven't read many books, and I can't even write well. When it comes to talking, it's all nonsense. How can I deserve to be close to you?" She cried all night. Xiao Fengxian could clearly see that her eyelids were slightly swollen, the tail of her eyes was tinged with red, and the milky chestnut pupils seemed to be darker than usual. He reached out his hand and instinctively wanted to rub it for her. Wei Zi avoided. A good dog doesn't block the way. She pushed him away with a dustpan and went to the yard to dry lentils with a cold face. With a fearless aura on her body, she was so petite and weak, yet seemed to have the courage to fight the world. Xiao Fengxian stood in place, the busy little widow like a hedgehog with long thorns all over her body. She drove Xing Qianri away with her own abilities, and even scolded him for being a dog. He was angry and amused. "I'm a dog, so what are you? Isn't the sister.in-law of a dog also a dog? Our whole family is a dog." Wei Zi stared at him incredulously. She was almost stunned by Xiao Fengxian's shamelessness. She grabbed a handful of lentils and smashed them at Xiao Fengxian. Xiao Fengxian was smashed out of the kitchen courtyard, holding back a lot of anger. He has never lowered his head to anyone, and it's easy for him to pull down his face and apologize to the little widow for peace. Who knows that the other party doesn't appreciate it? Is his sincerity in apologizing not obvious enough? He kicked a small stone beside his foot, and Xing Qianri suddenly sneaked out. He handed Xiao Fengxian a silver ingot and said, "Second cousin, can you help me tonight?" Xiao Fengxian waved the silver ingot and glanced at Xing Qianri, whose face was filled with desire and dissatisfaction. He had already guessed a bit in his heart and lazily asked, "What are you busy with?" "I want to go to your widowed sister.in-law's house tonight, for no other reason. It's just that my husband is unhappy after seeing her die. I plan to talk to her and help her relieve her troubles. You can watch the wind and keep the door open for me, right?" Xing Qianri frowned with a smile. "If you like it, then I'll finish my work and let her wipe you off." "It's not impossible." Xiao Fengxian was holding the silver ingot. The man in front of him laughed so disgustingly, as if his sister.in-law was just an item that could be used casually. He knew that the people in this house treated Wei Zi as something. Even when Xiao Lingxiao was still alive, he never considered Wei Zi a human. But it shouldn't be like this. His sister.in-law is weak and unable to take care of herself. Although she is more vulnerable to bullying than anyone else, she has a bodhisattva-like heart. Even in the face of a prostitute like him who is disliked and despised by everyone for giving birth, she is willing to smile and ask, "How is my second brother?" She never looked down on him. She personally cut his clothes and taught him to be kind every word, hoping that he could become a good person. Such a good sister.in-law, but he spoke ill of her and cried all night with grievances. Xiao Fengxian couldn't coax Wei Zi well and was already full of annoyance. Hearing Xing Qianri's shameless plan made me feel even more disgusted. He glanced at Xing Qianri and suddenly lifted his foot and kicked towards his lifeline. Xing Qianri let out a "ouch" and hugged his lifeline, rolling on the ground in a miserable state. "What are you doing? What are you doing? Xiao Fengxian, you have turned the tide. You are a prostitute and the most despicable bastard. How dare you take action against me, the only child of the Xing family?" Xiao Fengxian threw the ingot of silver onto him and sneered, "Xiao Lingxiao has just died less than half a year ago. You must force my sister.in-law to not spread it and lose her reputation. Be honest with me in the future. Wei Zi is Xiao Lingxiao's woman, but not yours. What are you doing to protect her?" Xing Qianri blushed and shouted, "Dogs meddle with mice. Xiao Fengxian, wait for me." His mother. He was hollowed out by alcohol and lust, and dared not fight. After getting up, he could only glare angrily at Xiao Fengxian before stumbling and running away. In the evening, Xing suddenly arranged for the whole family to have dinner together. Even Xiao Fengxian was called over. According to the rules of the Xiao family, Wei Zi, as a daughter-in-law, cannot dine at the table and can only stand and serve her in-laws. She can only pick up some leftover food after the whole family has finished eating. When she was laying the dishes, she saw Xing Qianri constantly sneering at Xiao Fengxian, as if there was some kind of holiday between the two. When the dishes were ready, Xing suddenly coughed. Xing looked at Xiao Fengxian unkindly and forced a loving smile, saying, "Fengxian, I heard from the women in the mansion that you haven't been to the academy this year and just squatted at home. I thought to myself, you're not as smart as your older brother, so reading is definitely not possible. It's not a problem for you to keep gnawing on your old age. So I discussed with your father and found a good way out for you." After she finished speaking, she nudged Xiao Gui with her elbow and gave him a few more glances. Xiao Guizheng's 8 Classics. It's like this, isn't your cousin Qianri's family engaged in unloading business? You're young and capable of carrying sandbags. In the future, you can go to his dock to carry sandbags, earn a lot of copper, and not starve to death in the future. Xing quickly agreed, this is a good job that no one else can even ask for. It takes 1,000 days to help you just for the sake of your relative's face. Fengxian, you don't have as much success as your elder brother. You should cherish this hard-won job opportunity. Xiao Gui stroked his beard and said, "Thank you, cousin." Xing Qianri was overjoyed. Xiao Fengxian is just a wild seed, he dares to kick his precious life root. When he goes to his house to carry a sandbag, he has 100 ways to abuse and torture him. Wei Zi looked at Xing Qianri and then at Xiao Fengxian. She vaguely remembered that there was no such thing in her past life. It must be for some reason that Xiao Fengxian offended Xing Qianri. But he's just a half-year-old child, how can he bear to be taken to carry sandbags? She became anxious and said, "Grandparents-in-law, my second younger brother is growing physically at this age and studying is also important. How can he give up his studies and go out to work?" Xiao Fengxian's eyes twitched slightly, and he couldn't help but glance at her. "What an unruly daughter-in-law, do you have the right to speak at home?" Xing couldn't help but be furious and knocked on the dinner table with chopsticks. "You're so bold now, you dare to defecate on your mother-in-law's head. Why don't you kneel outside?" Wei Zi quietly rolled her eyes. She looked at Xiao Fengxian with concern again before slowly kneeling down on the porch. Xing Qianri's gaze lingered on Wei Zi's body, and his cloudy eyes rolled around. He smiled and said, "Auntie, my mother's health hasn't been very good lately, and the maids and mother-in-law around her are always not good at taking care of her. Xiaozi's younger sister is delicate and skilled, can she come to my house to take care of my mother? When my mother recovers, I will send her back. The little widow is truly beautiful. The Xiao family is not easy to deal with. He tricked her into going to his house, so he can squeeze and flatten her." End of this chapter.